There's been a lot of debate over who invented crunk music. Now, I heard these debates over and over again during the many years that I spent working with legendary rappers and producers on songs that are now considered part of the bedrock of crunk music. And these debates usually ended up with one or two people claiming that they invented crunk or it came from their hometown. And I get it, because most of them and the people debating it today have a legitimate claim or a deep connection to a claim as the inventor of crunk, because they're actually rapping on the songs or they were in the streets or at the clubs where crunk was happening. Whereas I, just in case you didn't know it, I'm not a rapper. I'm more of a mountain guy. But I was there, in the studio working with him before Lil Jon looked like Lil Jon, before Bone and Banner were rich and famous, when nobody would openly admit to liking the Ying Yang Twins, and before there was even a debate about the origins of crunk music, because it didn't even exist yet, at least how we know it now. And I wanted to make a video about that, so I got together with some friends to talk about crunk music, our involvement in it, and how it came to be. But talking to them made me realize that I have a different perspective. This is what I saw. I started working on rap and hip-hop projects in the mid-1990s. It was new to me, but I did know that the vocals had to stand out, the drums had to hit hard, and the bass had to be huge. The drum sounds they're bringing into the studio typically came off of MPC 60s, MPC 2000s, 3000s, SP12s, and SP1200s. And I thought that stuff sounded really cool, which inspired me to do something a little different than I think most people were doing back then. Usually when somebody would bring an MPC or something like that into the studio, the engineer would record it by hooking up signal cables to each of the sampler's individual outputs and connect those directly to the inputs of some sort of analog tape machine or one of the early affordable digital recording systems. And they did it that way because back then your typical engineer would have seen this more of a transfer of one machine to another as opposed to recording a real performance. But to me, making a dope beat on a drum sampling sequencer of this type is a performance. So instead of running the drum sounds straight into the recording device, I ran them through some of the outboard gear I had at the time, mainly my Avalon VT737 tube preamps and my Soundcraft Ghost mixing console. At this point in time, I was recording digitally, so my goal was to warm up the signal, give it some saturation, and make it fat. Back then, most people thought that you should record without doing any kind of processing to the sound. But I've always recorded things the way I actually wanted them to sound, because as you're adding more sounds to the production, you're hearing a more finished overall sound, which means you're going to make better decisions on how those sounds blend, and there's going to be less surprises when you get to mix down. For a more aggressive sound, I'd run through my Soundcraft Ghost. Of course, I would do this with other sounds besides drums that were coming off the sampler. But to me, the thing that was important and what kept me involved in this developing Atlanta sound was that I was finally able to make the bombastic drums that would blow up speakers and subwoofers that I always wanted to do. Rock was very boring and restrictive at the time, whereas crunk had no limits. And there was this other thing that I'd always wanted to do but never had the opportunity to until I started working with Lil Jon, who I first met when he came to my studio, The Zone, to get on a song for the Full Contact Sports compilation album that was a joint venture between me, Chris Vermillion, and DJ Sky. That project brought a lot of people to my studio and, even more, heard the album and heard the work I was doing. So I started getting booked a lot, one of the first being Lil Jon. Now, when it came time to record vocals, Lil Jon told me that he and the Eastside Boys would be recording all together at the same time on one mic, and then they would stack the vocals, meaning that they would record different takes on different tracks. And these are the machines we're recording on. These are called ADATs. They used VHS tape, 8 tracks per machine, so I had 3 of them, so that gave me 24 tracks. So anyway, they would stack the vocals and layer them together to get a bigger sound, and he asked me if I was familiar with the process, if I knew how to do it, and I'm like, of course. In my head, I'm thinking about the producer Roy Thomas Baker, who recorded The Cars and had these massive vocal stacks, and bands like Queen, who would stack vocal upon vocal to get a big sound like Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, I'm sure, of course, I know how to do that. So they get in there, and they all get on mic, and they go through the song. So they record one track, we go and we do another one, and we do another one, And then we do another one. So there's 4 tracks with all of them together chanting. So that's 12 vocal parts, which is what most people would do back then. And they're kind of getting ready to come back in. It's like, oh no, let's do some more. I want to do a little experiment. So what I did is I sped the tapes up. I could speed it up with this machine right here. This is the remote control for these. And what that means is that the tape would play faster, so the pitch would be higher, and they would have to rap faster. But what would happen is later on when I'd slow it back down to the speed, those vocals would be now a lower pitch than the previous vocals they'd done. So we did 4 more of those. So it's like we'd go boom, we'd do another, do another, do another. Now we've got 24 vocals stacked on this thing. And I'm like, hold on, I've got one more experiment I want to do. This time, I slowed the tape down. So they would have to chant at a lower speed, but that would mean when I played it back later, then it would raise the pitch up. So it sounded like all these other vocals. In addition to that, I'd periodically go in there and shuffle them around. Instead of Lil Jon being in the middle and Bo over here and Sam over here, I'd move them around just to kind of change the sound because the microphone picks up the sound a little differently. Or maybe I'd move the mic back a little further. So we do 4 more. Boom, 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 boom. And at this point, I wanted to move on and do more, but they're getting a little tired because you got to realize back then, this is before computers, they had to do each chorus individually. They couldn't do one chorus and copy and paste them. So they had to go through, do all these tracks over and over again. And they're like, it's like, oh my God. And plus they're thinking like, what is this guy doing? So like, hold on. I want to listen to that. So he comes there and he listens to it and he's like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. But I was working at this other studio and I thought their vocals sounded pretty good. I want to make sure that this stuff sounds as good as that. So it's like, okay. So he gives me this tape and it was a DAT tape, which was another digital technology we were using back then. I stick it in the machine, play what he had done at this other studio. He listens for about 2 seconds and goes, turn that off. Keep doing what you're doing. So I sent it back in there and we continued to do more of that. But here's what I did, which really blew them away. I took the initial first 16 tracks that were here and I ran them through the board and I recorded all of those down to 2 tracks. So all of those 48 vocals were now on these 2 tracks. Then I erased these and I said, let's do some more. And we did more and we stacked and we stacked and we stacked. And in the end, we ended up with a whole lot of vocals. And specifically, the song I'm thinking about is Put Your Hood Up. If you listen to the vocals on that, especially at the beginning where they're going, ah, I counted it once. I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it's over 100 individual voices by the time you combine all of them together. And I've actually got an original handwritten first draft of the lyrics to Put Your Hood Up. During the recording process, he changed some of the lyrics. I've actually got a box of notebooks, lyrics. There's a lot of hit songs in here, but that's another story that'll come out in another video. But that is how I came up with that sound. And for me, it was a great thing because nobody would ever let me do that before. All the rock guys were a bunch of just pussies. And I was like, oh, this is my chance to make something really, really huge. So that's what I did. Now, I'm not trying to make it sound like I was the only guy doing cool stuff in the studio in Atlanta back then. There was a lot of great engineers and mixers in this town doing cool stuff. And while I'm pretty certain that a lot of people copied my vocal stacking technique, hell, I totally ripped off Ray C's stereo echo trick he used on hand claps, and I told him about it, and he thought it was cool because that's how Atlanta was. We all shared ideas, and we all grew together. To me, Crunk is defined by the sound. Most of the biggest hits, I mean global hits, had a pretty high production value. It was a sound that could compete with mainstream radio and bring rap to people who didn't listen to rap. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that everybody was coming to the Mecca, Atlanta, to record and make records and get mixing done. And we had a great community and great people working here. But I've gotten a little ahead of myself. Let's see what my friends say about it. Al Kapone is a Memphis music legend who has worked with 3 6 Mafia, 8 Ball and MJG. He's co-written songs for Lil Jon and E40, as well as much of the music for the movie Hustle and Flow, including Whoop That Trick, which is an anthem in itself. But he's also a bit of a Memphis music historian.
W.C. Handy, Stax Records.
And the conversations usually devolve into history.
The son of Willie Hall, he did a lot of drums at Stax, High Records. Willie Mitchell, the early music genres, all the Al Green hits. And then eventually...
Dude, it's amazing how much shit you know. Every time we talk, it's like, man, this guy knows everything. Hold on, let's get back to the crunk music. Did crunk music come from Memphis?
I would say 100%, especially when it comes to down south crunk. We called it Get Buck. And Get Buck is a short form of saying Get Buck Wild. It was like around 9th to 10th grade for me. So that was 86, 87. Around that time is when I was hearing people saying Get Buck and doing this dance called the Gangster Walk. Yeah, SMK is definitely one of those producers that was an artist himself. That's Studio G. You see the energy? The Memphis rap club scene, 808 drums, dark synths, repetitive bells, chants. By this time, this is like the early 90s right now, but the late 80s, the older hood guys are the ones that influenced us. So we just kind of kept it going by this time.
What you're talking about, Get Buck, that was a movement before it was known in popular culture. Like
Exactly.
I wouldn't, known about. That's what's interesting about it. It was underground.
The first time I heard the word crunk and crank, it was both terms, was late 80s easily. It was simply just like, we're going to crank it up. Man, they crunk that junk up. That's just the way we'll say certain things. So Get Buck is basically Get Buck Wild. Buck Wild is crunk, crank, all of that. It just, whatever you're going to, that's going to rev you up and turn you up and, get you lit. Yeah, we were doing what's considered crunk early on when it comes to Southern rap. We have videos from back in those days of the club scene, and it all comes from the club scene. You had DJs like DJ Spanish Fly playing certain songs that will make the club react in a certain way. It wasn't dancing. Normally you go to the club to dance. That's what the club was made for. But instead of dancing, you got these hood guys going around in a circle and, they basically disrupting the dance floor. It just caught on, and more people, I guess, liked the way they disrupted the dance floor. Mainly because it was mostly dope boys and the hardcore hood guys. So most people would look up to those guys.
Would you say it was like the hood version of a mosh pit?
100% a hood version of a mosh pit, no question about it. I hate to toot my own horn, even though I say it myself, but I definitely embodied that crunk energy, that Get Buck energy on stage. Most rappers, they will rap their songs and the crowd would just get crunk and get buck. The music already gonna turn them up, but I would perform with that same crunk energy or buck wild energy that the crowd would give. That would amp them up even more, because I'm throwing my hair and jumping around, and I'm just trying to project that same get buck, get crunk energy on stage. Most rappers was definitely not doing that. I want to say it started probably with the mixtapes. DJ Squeaky mixtapes, DJ Paul, DJ Juicy mixtapes, Player Fly mixtapes, Skinny Pimp mixtapes. I think it started there. Because the Memphis mixtapes didn't have any other music from any other city. It was only Memphis music on those mixtapes. So those mixtapes crept into the Atlanta scene. Big Oomp Records sold a lot of those mixtapes. I think DJ Jelly in Atlanta can confirm. So I think that was the introduction of the Memphis sound to Atlanta. A guy named Gangsta Pat, one of our early pioneers of Memphis rap, moved to Atlanta early on too. He was able to spread the sound out there as well because he actually lived there. People that was around forming that sound early on, it was definitely DJs like DJ Spanish Fly, who was a rapper and producer himself, DJ Squeaky, Psycho, DJ Zerk, SMK, DJ Paul and Juicy J, Gangsta Pat. SMK was actually an artist as well. Skinny Pimp. You had people like Side Manson, and that was A-Ball and MJG. If you listen to songs like Lay It Down, Lay It Down, that is a crunk song because it made people get crunk in the club. And of course, 3-6 Mafia, they made several songs. Tear the Club Up is just one of them. Hit 'em Motherfuckers is another one. You know what I'm saying? And the list goes on. So it's a lot of stuff that was created in Memphis. It wasn't popularized in Memphis. It didn't, or somebody else popularized it, but it was that underbelly in these clubs in Memphis that made it popular, that somebody else saw was like, man, we need to do that, and they'll get popular for it, but wouldn't give credit to where they got it from.
I just think that's an ongoing theme with Memphis in general. Memphis was kind of always doing it first, right?
We can go back to the blues. Blues on Beale Street, rock and roll, soul music. And here we are again with the hip-hop sound.
It's amazing how people like years ago, I'd hear conversations, and I actually have footage somewhere of them go like, I did it, we did it. But now when you ask them, they're all like, Memphis.
Yeah.
Why do you think, as far as like the public perception, is more or less that it came from Atlanta than Memphis? Why do you think that is?
Atlanta was a mecca, music mecca. You know, LaFace, So Def, they had record labels, they had managers, banks that were fun. They had a full infrastructure. It wasn't just artists. By the time the Crunk part came, they was already established, not just in hip hop, in R&B as well, with the popularity of all those artists from LaFace and So Def and Lil Jon is a product of So Def. He's a product of it. So by the time that he and other artists started to pop off, the infrastructure was already there. The labels were already there. So they were able to take that and commercialize it. The timing was perfect. They were able to commercialize it, and you getting video play. Whereas you look at our old video, we're not getting no damn video play. We lucky that we recorded some of that stuff back then. It was so underground and it was so early that we weren't in position to be seen on a mass level. Number one. Number two, once we started really getting popular for doing what we was doing in our area, it was rappers and DJs beefing with each other to the point where, it wasn't we weren't working together to uplift each other, to be honest with you. We was not uplift. It was too much beefing. Because Memphis is a gangster hood city. It's like, it is. That's what it is. It's super gangster, super hood. All of that translated in the club. When you see the energy of the crowd just bumping into each other and fights breaking out.
But on a business level, maybe it kept Memphis back from growing into a scene, because you're talking about the establishment in Atlanta. I'm even looking at I don't know if it's Put Your Hood Up or Be a kind of in both of them. Lil Jon's starts shouting out people, and he's shouting at cities. Atlanta's always been like a mecca, so we draw people in.
I always admired Lil Jon for that, because Lil Jon could have easily only made music for his artists and his label and not let anybody else in. He could have easily went that direction, and that happened a lot in Memphis. If you wasn't a part of the camp, there's no collaborating going on. Whereas by the time Lil Jon came in, he made sure Atlanta got the stamp as the brand Crunk. He didn't just keep the Crunk brand on himself. Even though everybody knew he was the genesis of Atlanta Crunk, he made sure it was Atlanta. I think I saw something where Lil Jon said that No Limit influenced Atlanta's crunk sound more than Memphis influenced Atlanta's crunk sound. You got to think about the late 80s and early 90s. At that time, Master P was actually in Richmond, California, doing Bay Area style music. When we were doing what we were doing, as you can see in the video, which was 808 crunk style, buck style music, that made the crowd get crunk and get buck. But all we're saying in Memphis is we still was doing it first. You looking at the video, we were doing it first. That's the biggest thing we're just trying to say. If you don't want to say we influenced you, okay, cool. But we were doing it first.
Got a question for you, Kaine. Who invented crunk?
My interpretation, I feel like 3 6 Mafia created crunk. Because I was in Crim High School hanging up posters when they were on Relativity Records, and what started it was Tear the Club Up, and it wasn't the Booty Shake version. It was the one with the street beat on it that caused fights everywhere. You ain't even had to be in the club when that song came on. To me, 3 6 Mafia, they started it because they was the group that we were getting rowdy to before Lil Jon and them came with Who You With. 3 6 Mafia, they introduced us being crunk the way we were in the club as teenagers. And that was when the crunkness of aggressive music hit here. Tear the club up. Because they actually blew up because people wanted to see them in the club, but club owners were not going for it because they were getting their club towed the fuck up. When the song come on, you stop fighting and start tearing the club up for nothing.
We had to stop playing it at Illusions.
Right. Club 559 in Atlanta. It was Freaknik on Ashby. Motherfucker riding around the 559, couldn't get in the club, but you can hear the music playing when you get to the red light by the club. And it's so sweaty in there, the mirror sweating, the wall sweating, you sweating, the broad sweating, the DJ sweating, the dog sweating, the food sweating. And so if you couldn't get in there, outside, this was what you would see. What? Yeah. And people rocking their cars. You talking about from 10 o'clock at night till 4 o'clock in the morning. Ashby is on flame. And it's more motherfuckers outside the club in the parking lot, park and road blocking the street. Fuck the police. And so that's what crunk is. When a song hypes you up to the extent of you'll get so hyped you'll dance, or you'll get so hyped you'll lose it and start a fucking fight. Yeah. I said Lil Jon watched the Atlanta kids, the projects, them all project kids in front of the club. Lay it down, come on. Lay it down. Everybody, what? Yeah, this the shit Lil Jon and the East Side Boys doing what we all did, getting hyped, crunk. It went from starting fights to tear the club up. Literally. It's crazy. It's crazy that Atlanta houses the greatest ambition, and I still gotta say this though. We are able to say certain stuff that other people from other southern cities don't feel like they can say. And that's attested to Dr. Martin Luther King, man, and a host of other people. All the rest of that shit, some bullshit.
Yeah. I guess that's the answer. All right, Bone.
What up?
The question is,
Yep.
who invented crunk?
I was talking to some friends of mine that are from Memphis and some friends that are from Atlanta that are in the crunk world, the crunk energy and everything. My guys from Memphis say what we do is not crunk, what we do is buck. And it's a different dynamic, it's a different flow, it's a different cadence, a different syncopation, it's a different sound than what we in Atlanta consider crunk. I remember when Lil Jon was talking about crunk back in the day, and he got his references from crunk. The word crunk is something that he kind of assimilated from both areas, from Memphis and from Atlanta. For me, I think crunk is kind of like it's a gray area. It's the same feel as crunk in Memphis and the same thing in Atlanta with crunk and buck, but what we do is not the same as Memphis. Memphis is more based upon a certain type of dance, a certain type of energy, a certain type of feeling, a certain type of, even now with the young kids that are doing buck dancing, they are actually doing what's indigenous to Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
Where Atlanta, we get crunk, we just jumping all around, getting up, bouncing into each other. So if I was to say, and it's just me personally, if I was to say who invented crunk, I don't know, man. It would have to be Atlanta. Crunk, the stuff that you mixed, that's Atlanta crunk. It's like a fine line between buck and crunk. 3-6 would say it's buck. They wouldn't say it was crunk. Atlanta doesn't consider what we do as buck. We consider what we do as crunk. I never considered my music as crunk, first of all. I've always considered my music as stadium music, energy music, power music, frequency music.
When you wrote Never Scared,
right.
I've just never thought about it. I mean, to me, like the song seems like a lot of your personality, but I was just kind of wondering when you initially wrote the hook and you wrote the lyrics, what was in your head?
I was at a Youngblood session. I was at Big Oomp's house. He had a student house. As you know, I wrote for a lot of people in Atlanta back in the day, so I was writing hooks for the Youngbloods at that time. And the Youngbloods had a beat going. It's totally different tempo, totally different flavor. And I wrote to it, I said, man, it's crazy. Then I thought about it, I said, man, this song has a lot of me in it, too much of me in it. I don't think I'm gonna give it to him. I took the hook And I had it. I just had it in my head. Then Avery hit me out of nowhere. He said, Bone, I got a beat for you, bro. Went over his house. And at the time, man, I was in a weird space. It felt like I'm never going to quit doing this, but I got to figure out some kind of way to feed my kids. You know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking to myself, like, am I going to be a chef, or I'm going to continue doing the circuit, like out in the streets, in the clubs, performing with the Chronicle and doing all this stuff just to keep this thing going because I love it so much, or I'm going to quit and go do this. And I was like, I ain't never going to quit.
Well, that was after you'd been on Tommy Boy.
Yep.
Because we had done some stuff for that, and there was that whole crazy trip to New York. That didn't work out. I think you'd been signed before that, but there was a lot of things.
It was a Belmont and with Tommy Boy.
As a music business, you get signed, you get dropped, and all that. It's disappointing, but I just remember there was a shift, because to me at that point in time, it seemed like you were focused. There was like a focus, and I could tell that something's moving here.
Right.
And then Dan Brown would show up with the paper bag with cash in it for me, which always a really great thing.
Dado!
Here's the bag of cash. Like, oh, it makes another song.
Right. And I think that that record was the epitome of what the South was at that time, Atlanta was at that time.
Well, it's interesting what you say, because what a lot of people don't realize is before the Crunk and the whole rap movement in Atlanta, before that, Atlanta was seen as a joke.
Yeah.
Everybody in the music industry and in much of the world saw this as a backwater podunk town. I had bands in the 80s and the 90s, and we would get a little attention from record labels, and we'd go up to New York to have these meetings and trying to get a record deal and all that. And if I told somebody from a record label we were from Atlanta, they would sometimes literally laugh in our faces.
Right.
Oh, you're not from New York or Nashville or L.A. or Chicago or something like Atlanta. And in their minds, they saw it as Dukes of Hazzard or something like that, and nobody took us seriously. When you say never scared and it was a feeling it was for Atlanta, and it was like, you know what? I think all of us kind of felt that way, like, fuck y'all.
Absolutely.
Fuck y'all.
Fuck y'all.
We got some shit going on down here.
Absolutely.
In Atlanta, we all cooperated, meaning like at your session, somebody else might pop in that was on a different label and work on their album, and they just hang out, or you would go hang out at the studio. That was one of the things I always noticed in the early days, is how much everybody hung out, and I'd meet people from all over, from all different camps, shall we say.
Right. We kind of intertwined with each other from camp to camp, whether it be BME, Organized Noise, DARP, or whoever, you know what I mean, Noontime. Everybody kind of worked together. We were just friends. There wasn't a ego there because we were all broke. You know, everybody was kind of coming up. Because we were all talented and we were all broke, we just kind of hung together. And that kind of was the actual premise of our life at that moment. As you know, we used to come to your studio and all of us was piss poor broke. You know, we were trying to figure out how to get to your house half the time, to your spot, you know what I mean? So it became this thing where we had to be together, not just because of the music, but because we were friends and we were just kind of in the same demographic financially, you know what I'm saying? So it became this overwhelmingly, let's work together for a common goal.
People ask me about it, and I never really had a perspective. I knew we had hit records, and it wasn't until literally a few years ago it's really hit me like how monumental it was, because at the time, I just figured like, oh, we're doing sessions, we're having a good time, and I kind of got into it because I liked y'all. Like y'all, the first group of people, like all the people you brought over, the first people I felt like, oh, I actually am accepted here. Right. And it was a chance to make loud music that blew out speakers with a lot of low end, which nobody else would let me do. But it was like, it was a lot of me, it was about the people. That was the main thing.
Absolutely. Lil Jon, myself, Collipark, Ying Yang, Tip, Banner, everybody was working together. And it became this amazing movement where nobody knew where it was coming from because we were all on one accord moving forward. So we kind of was raised like that through our community, through Maynard Jackson and Martin Luther King and, you know, and Hosea Williams and Ellie Pat, and the list goes on, John Lewis. All the stuff was kind of made by friendship. And I think that's what Crunk is to Atlanta. That type of Crunk was made here. And Crunk to me from Atlanta means family. That's real. Because we were all family, right? We still are. That type of Crunk is Atlanta. That's Crunk.
Smurf, who invented Crunk?
See, I look at that question different because I get asked about twerk a lot. And everybody from New Orleans They jump down. Anytime you mention anything about twerk, y'all got that from down here. The sound of crunk, I look at crunk as a sound in a genre of music. So where did that start? Or where did the inspiration of that start? That's different. To me, clearly, the inspiration for what became known as crunk started, in my opinion, in Memphis with 666. John made a genre of music called crunk that's a sound of its own.
Well, I'd say that Smurf pretty much sums up what a lot of people are saying today, but I'd like to add a couple things. When I first started working with Little John, he would often come to the studio hours before anybody else, and he would sit on the couch, and he would open up his briefcase, and he would start reading radio research reports, call-out reports, strategic surveys, music charts. He was basically studying the trends in current music. He also did his own kind of research. He would go to clubs, and not just hood clubs. He'd go to all different types of clubs to see what people are listening to, what it sounded like, how they were reacting. And he had a friend, and he told me this one time, that would take him to parties in the projects so that he could see what they were talking about, how they dressed, what they were listening to, what was going on in the streets. He was kind of an aggregator. He combined all this research to create a sound. Now, I'm not taking anything away from him. He's one of the smartest and hardest working people I've ever known, and one of the best producers I've ever worked with. And I think that one of the most original things that he did was the techno keyboard sounds that he would use in his production. He synthesized all these elements into a brand. But for all this to happen, there needed to be one place where new sounds were being created and recorded and people were meeting. So if you ask me who invented crunk, there's only one clear answer, and that is I did.